This is
This is Joe Cole.
This is Ruben Loftus-Cheek, and you're listening to the
London is Blue podcast.
All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. As always, your host, Brandon, Joe, my co-host, Dan, not Nick. He was doing double duty. Instead, Dan, we are here bringing our monthly update of the Youth Academy over at Cobham. And obviously, you and I, neither of us being experts, we brought in the big gun himself, Chelsea Youth.
I mean, we did. I mean, it's, when you talk about the Cobham crew, when you talk about the bridge from the academy to the first team, there is no one better than our friend Phil to do that. And in between raising a new one and moving house, has still found time to amass the world's best knowledge as it relates to our academy. And so, Phil, how are you holding up? And welcome back.
I'm doing very well, thanks, and thanks for the kind words. It's hard to believe we've already had a month of the youth football season, but that means there's plenty to talk about.
That is right, and that's what I have outlined here for us. So we'll talk about the Dev squad. Unfortunately, winless in the PL2 with 2 draws and a defeat, but they won their first group fixture of the Papa John's Trophy, so we'll cover on them. UEFA Youth League fixtures were announced for the U19's, and then we'll cover the 3 matches that the U18's have played, because boy, are they off to a literal flying start. Then later we'll talk about, after the break, we'll touch on Andrin's loan, how it went late, what that might look like. Sterling, Balo, Ampadu, and those who didn't get moves, Baker, Musanda, Uwakwe, McEachran. But yet we do have some positives on the loan front as well. Not all negative as the window shut with Conor Gallagher, Levi Colwill, and Armando Broja as well. So before we get into it, I think we can say a little gratitude, Dan. We have the Apple Podcast crew going. My word, my word, they are keeping you busy.
Well, we appreciate it. Again, a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts helps people find the show, helps people let them know that they're looking for a Chelsea podcast, that it is the best one in the business. So we want to thank Eater Crown IT from India, Isaac Major from Australia, Hong Kong Rob from, you guessed it, Hong Kong. We had Baja Chaser from the United States. We had Up the Chelsea Isaac from Canada, Kobe Tyndall from the United States, Trini GPD from the United States, Nancy from the Jacksonville Blues. We had Reagan's from the U.S., Ghost Rose, I'm guessing someone from Houston or Friends of the Bayou, in the United States, and then Ben from New Zealand, all leaving wonderful 5-star reviews. We super appreciate it, and thank you for doing great work. It's your turn now if you haven't done it before, so go ahead and do it just while you're listening to the rest of the intro.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into the Dev squad, which I have first. You can call them the U23's, just to kind of give you guys a quick overview of what this team is coming off of last season. Manchester City are the title holders. From there, we have the results in August. So Chelsea have a bit of ground to make up, I think it's fair to say. Last year, City winning, Chelsea kind of about mid-table fill, is that right? Maybe coming below the ideal standards?
They finished second in the end, but they were a little bit inconsistent in the early part of the season before coming together at the end. It wouldn't really have mattered much because Man City were on a record-breaking pace. They had such a talented group last year. A lot of the players who had beaten Chelsea in the delayed Youth Cup final from the season before. That's a really talented City squad, and some of them have made an impact in the first team over pre-season. But they'll be good again, as we've seen at the start of the season. But Chelsea themselves haven't necessarily been as bad as a winless start might suggest.
Well, let's go ahead. I guess the results that I've had so far up to this date, Dan, they opened with a 2-2 draw at Tottenham. That was very dramatic in what happened in that one, with a last-minute penalty save to preserve a point. Then drew 1-1 against Man United. We had a sending off. Then beat Exeter City. It was 1-1 in regulation, won 4-3 on pens in the Papa John's Cup. And then we recently just played West Ham and lost 2-1 as well. But there are some highlights in here that I want to talk about. The team is settling into a 3-4-2-1 system, but Dan, Harvey Vale is off to a flying start with 3 goals in 4 matches, one of them being penalty, and even up for August PL2 Player of the Month shortlist.
Yeah, it's a great little start for him. And I think when you actually look back at a couple of these results, particularly the West Ham one in general, West Ham, for those who aren't aware, don't have the table right in front of them, West Ham are currently 3rd. They have the most goals scored in the PL2 at 10. They've got a +4 goal difference, which puts them on level with Brighton and with Manchester City. And so in general, maybe not as terrible as a start as you might think, as the results might give you based upon just, again, we matriculate so many of those players. We have so many of those players who might be contributing to the squad out on loan. But yeah, I think if you want to wax a little more poetic around Harvey Vale and how he's got on, Phil, we will give you all the space to do so.
Yeah, we can start with Harvey because he fully deserves that nomination for Player of the Month. He's still not 18, early September. And it's easy to forget that sometimes when you see the standard to which he's been playing. He was up with the development squad for the second half of last season, but didn't always play in what we would call his favoured position, which is sort of as an attacking 8, number 10, middle of the pitch, being able to drive into the penalty area and make things happen. He was playing left wing back, which coincidentally is where he's been playing for England under 19s against Germany just now as I was watching. But you get him in and around the penalty area and things happen. He's a creator, he's a ball carrier, he's a finisher, and he's been the productive player to start this season, winning penalties that he scored himself and generally driving the team's play. And they drew at Tottenham and then they drew at home to Manchester United in two of the tougher fixtures that they're going to have to start a campaign, particularly at this point of the season as well, because some of the transfers hadn't settled down yet. So Tottenham still had Ryan Sessegnon playing in that development squad game. They had Harvey White, who spent the season on loan in League One last season. Manchester United were a bit younger, but one of the bigger quality academies you've got around. And West Ham, who started the season really well, they beat Arsenal 6-1. They had a bunch of investment over the summer, but they've also carried the likes of Yarmolenko and Masuaku and Manuel Lanzini into their development squad early on. Only Masuaku played against Chelsea, but it's this sort of thing. Those players come in and give you early season momentum. So not to have won is obviously disappointing. It's an academy that wants to win as often as they can. But we were moments away from saying 3 draws from 3, including 2 London derbies, because the West Ham game went to 16 minutes of added time. And West Ham scored their winner in the 10th minute of that added time. That can happen sometimes. There was an injury to a West Ham defender. Fortunately, I think he's okay. But you take the precautions. The match had a significant delay, and it didn't really feel like a normal match after that.
So I watched the first two, the United and the Tottenham, and you had some heroics in there, which I would like to point out, because not only do we have the goals, you had Lucas Bergstrom save that late penalty in the Spurs match. And we talked about this on the update a little bit, Phil, but for those that missed it, and then you have two matches later, Sharman-Lowe, the other goalkeeper on the roster, was the penalty shootout heroics against Exeter City. So again, a lot of strength, I guess, from the back moving forward. But they have a lot to kind of figure out. It seems like you can get a lead, but they can't hold the lead at this point. Is what I'm seeing with this group. No, they're not having any trouble scoring. I think it's the game management.
Yeah, for sure. And like we touched on in one of the shorter updates, that a lot of the players in the team didn't have a full preseason or were absent for injury or for COVID reasons and had their plans disrupted. So they were short of match fitness for the first half of the season and first month of the season. And it takes some time to build that up and to get routine going. And just as they've played 4 matches, then they're off for a fortnight for the international break for those who aren't going off and playing for their countries. So it's hard for everybody to manage, and certain clubs are in the same boat as well. But it's not been a terrible start. And the win at Exeter in the EFL Trophy was impressive. They probably should have taken all 3 points. For those unfamiliar, you get a bonus point for winning the penalty shootout. So Chelsea only have 2 instead of 3, having conceded deep into stoppage time in that one as well. And it's going to come together because they've got a good group of talented players who they just need to get fit and cohesive and playing together again.
Well, I mean, extra point though. It sounds like toppings, like a bonus topping. So it's just very fitting. It's the Papa John's tournament.
Yeah, exactly. It's the EFL Trophy. I'm not going to call it by a sponsor's name very often because it changes year on year and confuses people. But essentially, it's for the League One and League Two teams with invited under-21 academy sides. Controversial for supporters of EFL teams because they fear it being a backdoor into B teams eventually coming into the pyramid. But we've been through 5-6 years of this competition now and people know what it is. Some teams take it more seriously than others. Exeter took it relatively seriously and Chelsea performed pretty well on the night.
All right, last one I want to talk on the Dev Squad is Fiabema. He's got 2 goals in 3 matches. Yeah, how is his start so far?
He's done well because he was one of those who was missing a little bit in pre-season And he has the aura of a player who maybe should score more goals than he does. The Exeter game was a really good example of that, because he scored a really nicely taken goal just before half-time, showing the composure and technique to finish one-on-one. But 5 minutes earlier had a near identical chance that he nearly put out of the ground. And it's not the first time that we've seen that. And this is what development football is about. He's a talent. He's got so many of the things you look for in a modern-day number 9, who can also play in the withdrawn roles or wide in a 4-3-3, whatever you want to do with him. He ticks all the boxes. He just needs a little bit more time, a little bit more work to lead the line for the development squad. And he'll get that opportunity this year, because it's him and U18’s and the newcomer Jaden Wareham, who we signed from Woking back in the spring. George Nunn doesn't seem to be getting so many opportunities up front now, with some impressive performances as a left wing back. And the opportunity is going to be there for Fiabema to get plenty of minutes this season.
All right. Well, a quick look ahead at upcoming fixtures. We've got Manchester City when we return on the 11th of September. Then we head to Arsenal 8 days later. I'm sorry, they come to us 8 days later. And then lastly, to round out what seems like a tough month if this were the first team, they got the Liverpool team coming to Kings Meadow. Real quick, this team is playing at Stamford Bridge on the 19th of September, Phil. Pretty big deal.
Yeah, they are. It's the second of 3 scheduled games there this season. They drew with Manchester United at Stamford Bridge in August. They're expecting a fairly decent crowd for that one. The maximum they'll go up to is 5,000, but that's pretty decent for a development squad game. And then Liverpool at Kings Meadow will represent the first opportunity for the development squad to play in front of fans at their new home, because they spent all of last season behind closed doors there. And it's slightly closer to a traditional Chelsea community than Aldershot is. It's easier to get to. So hopefully it'll be a nice boon for people in the local area to get down and watch the development squad, see the stars of tomorrow for a very reasonable amount of money.
All right. Then lastly, are you concerned about this team, or are you still feeling bullish that they'll click and get it together? I'm
always bullish about the academy teams, because they're well coached. They're talented players. They're always pushing the younger ones through to new and improved challenges, and they'll loan players out at younger ages. It's a development squad, but this is a team that treats it as a competition they want to win. They are definitely one of the strongest squads in the competition, and we'll see how they get on. The game away to Manchester City will be quite revealing in that regard. City are the defending champions and maybe have the best team in the league, but Chelsea drew 2-2 home and away with them last season. They were at least on par on the pitch when they faced them, and they always have a pretty good match against one of the other clubs around who would like to assert themselves as having the best academy in the country.
All right, so we're going to pivot then to the U18s, and look, there's been some results so far in the way it's gone so far. For those who don't remember, there's the North and South division. So last season we finished very firmly mid-table in 7th position with 11 wins, 3 draws, and 10 losses, total of 36 points. Well behind Fulham, who was first in the South, and Manchester City, who was first in the North at 61. Current results were a 3-1 victory over Norwich, a 7-2 victory over Tottenham, 7-2 at home, 7-2 at home, and then Chelsea 5, West Brom 2. So, Phil, in general, these were some much better results as it contrasts to the U23s, and seemingly more settled in those initial couple matches.
Yeah, they have been settled, and a little part of that has been because some of the older players have been up with the development squad, some of them on merit and some of them through necessity with the aforementioned absences. But what it has meant is that a significant number of the new first-year scholars, 10 of them, have been getting minutes early and often. They're a very highly rated group. Several of them have been away with England under-17s recently and been impressive with them. Ronnie Stutter among them has been captain. He's been in fine form so far, scored in the first 3 league games, which no academy striker has done for some 25 years, which if you think we've had Tammy Abraham and Dominic Solanke and Ike Ogbo and Jude come through, and Armando Broja scoring prolifically, none of them have managed to score in their first 3 league matches. He has. He's been an absolute live wire in a team that loves to attack, loves to score goals, creates chances, and could have had more than the 15 they've already scored.
I was watching some of these results, and they're just flooding in. One question I do have is up up top with the U23s. They're playing that 3-4-2-1 type formation. I couldn't get any information on what is this formation style of this team, minus the fact when I look at the highlights at Tottenham, it was just relentlessly run and attack and smother your opponents until they give up.
Yeah, they were a class apart that day. This is a team that traditionally also plays the 3-4-2-1, 3-4-3, whatever you want to call it, but they've started this season mainly in a 4-3-3 shape. It's been very loose and very fluid in certain situations. Both fullbacks, for example, will get up and down as if they're playing wing backs, and you only have the two centre halves. You can get away with that in some academy games because a lot of teams will play a bog standard 4-3-3, and you've got two centre backs against a striker who, more often than not, isn't going to be big enough to occupy two defenders by himself. So you can be ambitious and know that you've got the better quality players and play a little bit more expansively at this level. Then you've had Lewis Hall and Billy G holding in midfield, and then a front four that's very fluid. It's mainly been Jimmy Tarian and Edwin Anderson, Leo Castledine and Ronnie Stutter moving around. Stutter nominally the striker and Torianen nominally the 10, but a lot of them will move in and out. Torianen will come deep, and he's been really impressive. And that fluidity and the quality of Lewis Hall's passing from the deeper positions has just opened up teams time and time again on the overloads. You have Richard Olise down the left, which is really impressive for him because he's mostly a right-sided player. He's been outstanding. Derek Abu's been really good on the right. Brody Hughes, a centre-half who can also play at right-back, has been in making goals against Tottenham. So they've been scoring plenty of goals. They've played some really attractive football, and it's an exciting time for the team as they come back in after this international break to face Birmingham, looking to stay top and to stay in goal-scoring mood.
This is all exciting. This is all really, really exciting. And not to jump in on Brandon Busby's script here and parade, but I think, Phil, again, all of these are maybe players who are new, right? Some of the U23 player names people are going to be very familiar with. We talked about the fact, though, that we've got 10 first-year scholars in this U18 side. Who are the one or two that you would maybe point out just to watch or keep an eye on that you think are going to really flourish this season, again, just from that small subset of matches?
Well, I just rattled off 4 or 5 of them who've done really well. Stutter is obviously the main man up front. He's atypical of recent Chelsea strikers in that he's not a big presence at number 9. Abraham's always been tall, even if he didn't fill out. Dominic Solanke the same. Ugbo's got a presence about him. Broja, big, powerful striker. Stutter is more in the Michael Owen vein as the comparison that immediately came to mind. And it's dangerous when you start to throw around comparisons to players who had a really, really high level career. But he loves playing on the last shoulder, the last defender's shoulder, and playing on those through balls from midfield. He will run all day. He'll run the channels. He's got quality when he gets the ball out wide. He's an instinctive finisher in the box. He's got that low centre of gravity that allows him to dribble past players at speed. And it's been a while since Chelsea had that sort of centre forward. So it's a challenge for them to slightly adapt their playing style while still retaining the core principles of it. And it's really working well for them early in the season because Lewis Hall's passing from midfield has been a joy to behold at times. Same with Billy G. Those are 2 first-year scholars as well. They keep the play moving in a vertical fashion. They get balls playing between defenders and midfield and between the fullbacks and centre halves, pulling players left, right, and centre. And then you've got the intelligence of someone like Castledine, who's been playing for England at every age group. Chelsea signed him as a 15-year-old from Wimbledon, where his dad was a Premier League player in the 1990s. He'll move around. He'll join the play with little touches here and there, and has that eye for goal, driving in on the edge of the box and looking to get in on the act.
So from what and to kind of like provide context to this is like a very formative age group and team. If you go down the table and kind of look at other results, right? Because you look at this, I'm like, okay, Chelsea have scored an amazing amount of goals. Granted, the Tottenham match was maybe a bit of a one-off, but you've conceded 5 and 3. Chelsea have scored 15. Villa have scored 14. Arsenal scored 10. Southampton has scored 12. This is a league of learning. And the fact that there's so much scoring, but then so much conceding, to me, really goes about that. And the poor Norwich City team that are negative 14 on goal difference after 3 matches.
Yeah, it's been a wild start to the season. You mentioned that Arsenal have scored Villa have scored 14, Arsenal have scored 10. Villa scored 10 of those against Norwich, but conceded 5 to Arsenal. And
correct.
It's one of those things where there's been some really chaotic scoring in the first couple of weeks of the season. So Chelsea play Birmingham in their next fixture. Birmingham just beat Tottenham, but lost 7-2 to Southampton before that, and one of the Southampton players scored 5. And it's been wild at the start of the season, and it's not necessarily through any sort of delayed pandemic effect or players being missing in pre-season. It settled down in the round before the international break, but academy football is sort of prone to this because, as you say, it's still a very early development stage for them as professionals. There's a style of football that is not entirely representative of what you'll see even at PL2 level. Definitely not the professional game in terms of contact, in terms of intensity, in terms of the pace of play. And the difference in talent level is so much wider than it narrows closer towards the top level you get. And so you end up with situations where everyone's talented to a degree, but obviously the players at the bigger clubs are more likely to have more talented 16-year-olds at the time. And through any number of variables, you'll end up with Villa beating Norwich 10-0 one week, but struggling the next.
Again, that's kind of, I'm just really want to like frame this for people as they look at these results and these score lines, is that like this is, you know, like I said, a formative time where these players are learning how to be successful professional footballers that are, you know, want to go on from there. And so I feel like there's just so much learning. And as you and I were talking in one of our updates, it's a much more chaotic. There's a lot more transition in these matches than other ones. And so it's fun, but I just want people to kind of pause and not get too wrapped up in a lot of the highs and lows, because it is going to be a long season just in general. So
well, it's good that you point that out though, Brandon, because it's really good to understand that in those first 3 games, Chelsea, U18's formative understanding of how to win and win effectively. Tottenham U18's learning to carry on that tradition of 7-2 losses. Just really, really exceptional stuff.
Yeah, they've had a rough start to the season. But as we look ahead at September's fixtures, 3 more matches for this group. So they're going to be playing at home to Birmingham City, at home to Blackburn Rovers on the 18th of September, and then they will be headed over to Leicester City on the 25th. So again, 3 more matches that you can take in. Plenty of youth football after the international break. Phil, anything to touch on as we head into September with the 18s?
Yeah, the Blackburn game is the first match in the Under-18 Cup, which is not to be confused with the FA Youth Cup. It's more the equivalent to the League Cup, where it's played between the 24 Category 1 teams, and it gives an opportunity for intra-region football. So obviously we've been discussing Chelsea's part of the South League. Ordinarily their 20-something fixture list doesn't include matches against the northern teams. This cup competition provides that, with 2 north and 2 south in each group. So Chelsea are playing Blackburn, who are currently top of the North table and in fine prolific form themselves. That will be more of a challenge to people just assuming Chelsea are playing Blackburn, a championship team, might assume they're a really good team. And it's traditionally an opportunity that Chelsea use to give minutes to maybe some schoolboys or players who are on the fringes of the squad in the cup. But Blackburn are going to come in good form with a new manager, and it's maybe the toughest match that Chelsea have had so far, on paper at least.
Yeah.
One other thing that we just haven't touched on yet, but is also making a return, though, is U19 and the UEFA Youth Cup. Because that's another
correct.
Thing where we'll have matches against Zenit and Juventus coming up next month, which, Phil, from that standpoint, how ready do you feel maybe our sides are going to be heading into that? And how will that work? Because obviously it's U19 versus U18. And for those who maybe aren't aware of how that competition sets up.
Yeah, it's obviously Chelsea have won it twice in the middle of last decade and been in 2 finals otherwise that they didn't win. So it's about time that they did get back and win the trophy again. It mirrors the Champions League as far as Chelsea are concerned, so that we're playing Juventus, Malmo and Zenit St Petersburg in the group stage, with the home and away fixtures mirroring the first teams during the same game week. It was on hiatus last season. UEFA tried to schedule a revised version of the competition, which would have been straight knockouts from March, but obviously the state of the pandemic through Europe meant it was sensibly abandoned. So it's back, and it's a competition that's eligible for players born January 1st, 2003 and later. There are provisions for 3 2002 borns in the group, so Chelsea have a handful of those, Josh Brooking, Lucas Bergstrom among them, but the likes of Xavier Mbuyamba cannot play, he is too old, and so the competition being on hiatus for a year will have cost some players a year of eligibility that they may not get back and therefore never get to play in it. That's unfortunate, but the 2003s, the likes of Harvey Vale, 2004's Jude Sabel, Charlie Webster, these are going to be important players in a team that will come along as it goes through the season. I think they've got I wouldn't say a favourable group stage. All the teams in there look capable, but at the same time, they've qualified because their senior team are in the Champions League. It's not like the other half of the UEFA Youth League draw where the domestic champions of each country qualify. So I think Chelsea will always back themselves in this sort of competition to at least get out of the group stage. They've only failed to do that once, and that was the last time they were in it in 2019-20. And they'll go from there. They'll grow throughout the season and grow in confidence and grow as a team, and you'll see who emerges as the leader and the more experienced players trying to step up.
All right. Again, we love European trophies. All right. This is a fun one for this group. So high expectations, but just wanted to announce that the schedule was released. To your point, Phil, in your tweets, you caveated with all dates, times, venues subject to change. So we'll keep everyone apprised. But yeah, those will start in September. So a big month in September. I think big month. For the club across all teams. So, but hey, we're going to take a real quick break. When we get back, we have a lot of questions. We're going to talk kind of about the quote unquote youth exodus that may or may not have happened this summer. Talk about some maybe unfortunate loans or non-loans, and then obviously end with the positives as well. So thank you to the sponsors for financially supporting the show, and we'll be right back. All right. Well, coming out of the break, we also wanted to thank some of our Patreons who are lovely, lovely people hanging out with us on Discord. Dan, we've got Gabriel, who upped a monthly to a yearly sub. You've got Brandon, Justin, McLean, Thaddeus, Ty, and Nishit all joining the bandwagon as well. Welcome to the family. Again, just want to take some time out to thank everyone. And obviously, Dan, we're going to have more episodes continuing this week. As we just talked about here, all the youth teams are playing, the women's has started, and then the men are going to be back post-international break. So just keep the subs up.
Oh, yeah. Look, we've got a Tinkerman episode coming from our boy Joe Tweeds and Yaz, a new member of the London is Blue family in that regard. We've got an Aston Villa preview and then match review coming up the following weekend. Abby Mack is going to be joining us back again in the hot seat to do that. And then we've got Champions League midweek matches. So it just doesn't stop, Brandon. It does not stop. We did 19 pods last month. We are budgeted for 18 at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll find a way to get to 20 accidentally. But Phil, let's go ahead and bring you to the point in the script where I took a little screenshot of some things you tweeted out a few days ago. And it was actually in reference to your tweet back on the 25th of January. So this is when Tuchel took charge. Would I be correct in that timing?
It was the day that Lampard was relieved of his duties. So close enough because everyone knew the same day that Tuchel was arriving.
Think about it as not Lampard leaving.
Yes.
To your point, you said, telling you now, if you've ever expressed any interest in any single one of the numerous talented youngsters still coming through at Chelsea, and you're happy with today's developments, i.e. Lampard leaving, be careful what you wish for. Those players, their agents, their families will be watching closely. And now, fast forward to your tweet on the 1st of September, it said, you quote tweeted saying, if you're keeping up, Abraham, Tomori, Andrin, gone on a loan with an option. Guehi gone, Ugbo, Livramento, Bate, Harris, Simu, Lewis, Ekwa, Wiggett, all gone, and the rest are loans without option. Is a bit different. But to your point, it's just that there was a lot of movement this summer, and right or wrong, I tend to think that unfortunately these are the only players that carried value in the market, unlike a lot of the high-wage first-team players that don't get any minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that in itself was a coalescence of the market conditions and the window at the I wouldn't quite say the end of a pandemic, but the end for the Premier League are concerned, because fans are back in stadiums and the business is being run nearly as usual. But it was obvious from the moment that Lampard departed, whether it was last January, whether it was this summer, whether it was 5 years' time, that this sort of thing was going to come, because any other manager than him, or a very select number of cases, regardless of their merit to be manager, doesn't have the same credit built up for the academy players. Had he stayed, Chelsea would unlikely be European champions. Let's be honest about that. But for that moment of success, there is, on the flip side, Chelsea have lost a generation of young talent. For enough money to fund a move for Romelu Lukaku this summer, fine. But potentially a larger cost. And it's a conversation that requires a lot more depth and nuance and time, and there'll be opportunities for that. But essentially, if this is to become a more common thing in windows to come and in the months and years ahead, then you'll be seeing more situations where Tino Livramento going for 5 million will be the peak of it, because players who don't make the first team aren't going to have the opportunity to earn or to garner such a transfer fee as Marc Guehi did. Yes, Guehi played twice for the first team, but those two first team opportunities were impressive. He proved that he could hang at that level in the League Cup against Manchester United, against Marcus Rashford, and so on. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but nevertheless disappointing to see a dozen or so academy players leave in the same summer.
I was going to say one question, Phil. So, like, and maybe in the context of this too, we've also seen, Trevor Chalobah end up staying with the first team squad this season, potentially looking likely that he'll get some type of contract renewal coming up here. And we've talked about this, right? It's the balance. Like, how do you balance all of these things? Winning all of your competitions, grooming great players out of the academy who can make their way into the first team, and then also signing the best of the best internationally, like bringing in Lukaku to come back after the second attempt at bringing him back. So, like, I guess maybe in kind of all that together, like, how are you feeling, maybe just in general, about the kind of the state and standing, even with some of these maybe being like a loan with like a buyback, or a sale with a buyback option, which maybe gives that player a little bit more peace of mind, but also gives Chelsea potentially a costly but maybe less dangerous long-term play if they do want to eventually bring that player back.
Yeah, the buyback clauses are mostly a protection thing for the club, and there's a tiny little bit of PR massaging in there because it eases the sting of any departure. But Chelsea had a buyback clause on Jeremy Berger, they had a buyback clause on Nathan Ake, and they didn't activate either of them. And that's not to say that either player was good enough to be bought back by Chelsea, but when you end up in the position where it's a maybe, do you bring Ake back or not? Because Ake went to Manchester City. He's only served as a squad player there and hasn't necessarily been used in the right way, but he went to a club of Chelsea's standing. And therefore you think, if Chelsea have got that choice between Ake and somebody else, do they trigger the clause anyway? And what level of talent do these players need to be for Chelsea to then want to trigger it? And you then have to convince the player to come back at the same time. And some of them may have doubts about what their future looks like at Chelsea as an established player. They know that there's a world of teams out there for them to do that. And I don't put too much stock in it right now. Chelsea bought Lukaku back and didn't have a buyback clause there either. So I tend not to see too much value in them, but I understand why the club put them in. And in terms of the Trevor Chalobah thing, he's done brilliantly in the opportunity he's been given, but everything rests on such a fine knife edge that any part of it could have fallen apart, because this wasn't by design. He got his opportunity through being part of an extended squad in pre-season while the seniors were returning from the Euros. He took that chance. But what would have happened if Chelsea had got the Jules Koundé deal over the line? That's a deal that immediately affects Trev in numerous ways, because it would take away the opportunity to play at right centre half. It would take away the opportunity to play perhaps at middle centre half because of opportunities for other defenders moving inside. The addition of Saul in midfield takes away the ability for Trev to play in midfield. So it's serendipitous that they haven't ended up signing Koundé for Chalobah's opportunities, but the intention was to sign Koundé. And that leaves you thinking, hold on a minute, what minutes does Trev actually get here while they're trying to convince him to sign a new long-term deal? And these are the sorts of things that are instructive, not only to this generation of academy players who can see that there's doubt about their opportunities, but for the next lot coming along as well, who'll see that Tino Livramento has gone in at Southampton, a very respectable Premier League club, see that Tino Anjorin's gone on loan to a Europa League club, seeing that Tomori's gone to Milan after a season in the first team and impressing. These players are getting opportunities at a high level of football. And the players that are coming through after them are of similar caliber and may not be prepared to take the long waiting game that someone like Armando Broja and Levi Colwill clearly are doing.
Well, we can talk about them as well because there were some late window loans for some of those players. Obviously, Colwill getting his earlier. But you just talked about Tino Anjorin, Sterling, Valo, and Ampadu. Those are the ones who got moves. I don't know, again, if you want to start with Tino Anjorin's move to Russia. It sounds like is it convenient or like easy to connect the dots with Tuchel and all the connections they have at Lokomotiv Moscow and him taking the number 10 shirt, or is that just kind of the way it happened?
I think it's more likely the way it happened than any particular connection because let's project the Lokomotiv trigger the option to buy in the winter window, as reported by our friend Liam Toomey, that they're expected to do so, which would make him a permanent Lokomotiv Moscow player. Chelsea have the right for a buyback of double the fee, so 17 million to sell him, 34 million to buy him back, give or take, on the conversion from euros. Let's say 2 years down the line, he's in a position where Chelsea are looking to buy him back. Is Thomas Tuchel Chelsea's manager at that point? Is Ralf Rangnick still in the same situation at Lokomotiv? There's so many variables into it, as we've just talked about with the option to buy on other players. Nobody knows what's going to happen down the line, and the players know this more than anything else. And Anjorin has been, by any measure, an outstanding performer for Chelsea at every academy level. He's been among the most productive goal scorers for players of his position, for club and country, for the last 3, 4, 5 years. And the opportunities weren't forthcoming at Chelsea. Pre-season was what it was, COVID absences be damned and whatever. But he's seen that there's an opportunity for him to grow as a player and as a person, moving to Moscow, playing in the Europa League, getting the respect of a club legend, Dmitry Loskov, who had the number 10 shirt, retired for the best part of a decade. It's been brought out of retirement and bestowed to Anjorin for the potential club record signing that he'll be. It's not common at all that Chelsea send players on their first loan to a club of that level. Only Andreas Christensen's gone on a debut loan to a team of that sort of standing in European football. And that's the regard that Anjorin should be held in. It's not going to be a surprise to anybody that he will impress once he's sorted out there. I know there's talk that because of a delayed preseason, they're going to have him on a personalised fitness program to get him up to speed so he's ready to play towards the end of the month. And then look out, because we've seen what he can do throughout the development squad and the under-18 at Chelsea, and odds are that he's going to be another one who hits the ground running.
Well, that is exciting. I mean, like, you know, in general, like it's unfortunate again that, you know, we, you know, lose out maybe on a talent, and you know, he had that one moment in preseason where he was kind of stumbling and rumbling and like tried to get knocked down probably about 4 or 5 times, carried the ball forward into the box, ended up getting, I think it was a shot off, and looked spicy, but definitely didn't get a chance to maybe get much more than that. But in general, if Chelsea are continuing to line up these opportunities, it still makes the academy a attractive location for, you know, for potential footballers of the future. I would say the one that actually, you know, maybe as a loan deal, which kind of struck me as unfortunate, and I know that you have this buried a little deeper, Brandon, but the Ampadu one, since we brought his name up, like that one felt a little unfortunate given the fact that that was the Saul deal taking too long, the fact that maybe Newcastle could have come in for him, and then you don't get you now send him to essentially another side in Italy that is probably going to be challenged with relegation again 2 seasons in a row. From like a psyche perspective, I personally don't love it. Like, yes, he's going to go wear brilliant kits, but we're not paying him to be a fashion model. We're trying to develop him into a footballer, Phil.
Yeah, absolutely. The point about leaving the loan to the last minute is definitely not lost on me nor several other fans or people in the academy. It's unfortunate Newcastle may have moved for him, but Chelsea made them wait. They moved on to other targets that then fell through for themselves. Venezia are considerably weaker than Sheffield United by comparison to last season. Sheffield United were relegated, surprisingly perhaps, considering the way they returned to the Premier League the year before with a top half finish. And they were valuable minutes for him last season, but you're looking for him to take a step forward in his career, and it doesn't quite feel like he's done that with this move to Venezia. Now, the positives, he gets to live in a lovely part of Europe for a little while. And also it will be beneficial to take in and learn from another culture. Nathaniel Chalobah played a season on loan at Napoli under Maurizio Sarri, and while he didn't actually get a lot of playing time, he absolutely grew as a person. He grew tactically as a footballer, and his appreciation of different things as a midfielder. And maybe that's what we'd hope for as much as anything from this move for him. Perhaps also an opportunity to play in midfield, because I think the more you look at him, the more it seems that his attributes are best suited to that midfield role that he plays for Wales, where he can be a driving force in and out of possession. He can be a bit of an enforcer, and he can be that sort of hybrid holding midfielder that drops into the back three. You can't necessarily do that at Chelsea because there's already three defenders behind you. And we know he went to Leipzig a couple of years ago. Didn't really work out for him. I wouldn't say this is a make or break move because he's still really young by most measures. He's 21 this month. But we'd like to see a little bit more positive momentum coming forward for him, except that an 11th hour move to Serie A relegation contender doesn't really feel like that.
It sure doesn't. And he's not the only, I mean, at least he got a loan, you could say, if you're trying to find a silver lining. But again, being told with 7 hours left in the window that, oh, just kidding, you can go on loan, probably didn't make him super excited. Some players who didn't get loans, Luce Baker, Charlie Musonda, Chiriku Wakwe, and George McEachran.
Yeah,
not Josh.
Josh is a few years older now.
Exactly. the Ancelotti golden boy that unfortunately didn't pan out. But anyways, they didn't, and then including, you could even throw in Callum Hudson-Odoi, who allegedly had that late loan interest from Borussia Dortmund, who didn't go. And I know, obviously, I'll let you touch on any of the other players first, but I do want to circle back to Callum Hudson-Odoi because you're tweeting about him as well. But definitely some people on not only the first team, as we've kind of grumbled about guys that are getting roster spots and Champions League spots and numbers assigned to them that maybe we aren't totally thrilled with. It sounded like the same thing happened in the academy, Phil.
Yeah, it's one of these things that Hudson-Odoi, by most metrics and most advanced stats, and is stuff that I'm sure Joe and Yaz and various people will get into on other discussions in good time. But he doesn't get the playing time that his performances necessarily warrant. And we've heard Tuchel talk about it, that he's in competition with the likes of Timo Werner and Kai Havertz and Hakim Ziyech and Christian Pulisic for one position. And he's still managing to perform to this standard in a relatively unfamiliar right wing-back role. If you're not going to give him the playing time, and there's little to suggest that he's going to get it based on his time under Tuchel so far, then blocking a loan move doesn't benefit anybody, because at worst, you're going to annoy him further to the point where he will force or do his best to force a move. And at best, he's not going to get the minutes that he needs to really start to prove himself. If he has an outstanding game in the League Cup against Aston Villa, which is when most people expect he'll get his next significant minutes, is he going to retain his place in the team? It's such a frustrating situation to see, because the talent is there. And a loan move, as much as we wouldn't necessarily wanted to see it because we know what he can bring to Chelsea, a loan move would have at least been able to unlock that same sort of momentum that someone like Jadon Sancho managed to gain at Dortmund after moving there of his own volition from Manchester City. They are contemporaries. They're both from the England 2000 generation. They have a similar style of play. They're both England under 17, World under 17 Cup winners in that 2017 team. Sancho played the group stage as Hudson-Odoi was on the other wing to him. They were as good as each other at every level coming up. And you can see what happens when one player is given the minutes he needs to continue his progression and one starts to stall. And unfortunately, we end up with the same questions about Callum, about it's all tied to work rate and to intensity. And those same questions don't get asked of other players.
I think for me, to answer your question, if he does well against Villa, will he keep his spot? No. I mean, Chalobah did well against Palace, scored a goal, was dropped for Arsenal, and we didn't see him till a sub appearance later. So, look, I think that happens. But yeah, I mean, when you put in some of the tweeted out some of these stats from The Athletic about what Callum has done in limited minutes, comparing him to Christian Pulisic, it definitely is a little bit of a head scratcher there, especially if you have someone willing to take a player and develop him in a top league. Like, let him go, figure it out, let him make or break it. He's a professional. He'll bet on himself, I'm sure, every single time.
And it's striking that everyone else has either been sold or loaned, of those who are on the fringes or not quite getting the minutes they wanted. Abraham's gone, Angelin's gone on loan. He hasn't been allowed to go, and it doesn't make sense from anyone's perspective unless there is a definitive plan to get him the minutes he needs. And it's more of a show me, don't tell me. Until he gets consecutive starts in the position that we know that he can play his best football at. And that doesn't have to be as a left attacking midfielder. It could be on the right, but it's sure as hell it isn't as a wing back, because you're only going to get the opportunities to affect the game in the final third as a wing back in certain fixtures. And then it's not really representative of what he can be as a game changer in the big matches.
Yeah. Let's transition here to some of the positive loan performances that we've seen. Dan, your boy, Gallagher season, tearing it up at Crystal Palace now that he's eligible to play after the season opener against Chelsea. Bagging goals now, too. What is this?
Yeah, sneaky 5.5 midfielder in that fantasy Premier League lineup for some people as well. It just... he looks bright. He's getting further forward, and I think this was something we had talked about earlier, Phil, in previous episodes. What type of loan is this going to be? How are Crystal Palace going to play? Are they going to play a system under Vieira where they're going to be a little more expansive? They're going to try to play with the ball. They're going to be more attack minded, or are they going to be defensive, counterattacking, trying to salvage the results they need to be appropriately mid-table and not have to worry about relegation? And I think in general, we've seen it is more of the former rather than the latter. And that has me more excited for how much developmental time or what the development will look like as long as Vieira is there and they can keep some of the good results going.
Yeah, they seem to be fairly open and attacking so far, and putting a lot of responsibility on Connor to be that presence from midfield who can drive with the ball and get into the box and score the goals like we saw away to West Ham. And it's looking like a positive loan. And if he has another top season in the Premier League for a team that, let's talk about them as a mid-table team if everything goes well. What happens next summer if he has a 6 to 7 goal Premier League season for a decent Palace team and Chelsea sign Saul on a permanent basis? What happens to Connor at that point? You've just sold Tomori for 20-something million. You've sold Guehi for 20-something million. If Connor's in that bracket, and you might think he can command a bit more as a midfielder who brings goals to the table, if Chelsea are looking to sell him, then is a 30 million deal viable? Is somebody going to pay 30 million? Does Connor end up on another cycle of loans? There's nothing wrong with bringing in Saul for a season on loan. He fits the bill for a bunch of reasons, even if I think expectations are a little bit higher than they should be for a player who hasn't had great form in 12 to 18 months. But when you have an option to buy on him and you've got development invested in Gallagher, what you then do in a year's time brings us back to that instructive point about the academy, because it's not quite as easy as saying, well, Connor should back himself to come in at Chelsea and to prove himself, because history tells us that the odds are against him no matter how well he performs.
Well, I think if and when Connor performs this season, you're running out of places to loan him. You can't keep climbing the table. At some point, it's like, are we there or are we not? Because to your point, like if you're, getting 6 to 7 goals, and look, dude loves to tackle out of possession. All right. Like, let's not just put it all offensively. Connor is an absolute team player out of possession as well and loves to scrap. You're going to run out of room for him. You either have to say, all right, he's either in the first team or we're selling him, because, between these levels, there's fewer and fewer places for players to go without being signed. A team in either Europa League or fighting for top 6 don't want a lot of loan players. They want players that are going to be there for the long term.
We've just talked about Chelsea's midfield options for the future without mentioning Billy Gilmore, and I think everyone would agree that Billy is arguably further ahead in the pecking order than Connor because he had that time under Lampard and had time with the first team squad, whereas Connor's been out on loan. If they have similar sorts of seasons and you've got 2 players looking to come back in for maybe not even one spot, and people will tell me all the time they can't all make it, but that isn't the point. Nobody's expecting them to all make it. It's when you have the decisions to make, like, if Saul has an outstanding season as the best midfielder at the club, then of course you're going to sign him. But if he has an okay season, if he's good at times and average at others, then that's the point where you have to say, well, do we spend on him or do we trust what we have? If you're talking about sort of the players at Chelsea that Gallagher would replace, it's either Saul or Kovacic, and I don't think he's at that level yet, but you have to give him the opportunity to show that he can be without sending him out on loan after loan after loan, because the player doesn't want to do that. And every subsequent loan you take is a risk of them losing that momentum. And from some people's perspectives, losing the value that you could sell them for at the peak, which is what Chelsea have done this summer. But you potentially lose an asset, the likes of Mason Mount, Reece James, Andreas Christensen. They've only become what they've become because they were given the chance to do it.
Yeah, absolutely fair. Another one on loan, Armando Broja, is, going from strength to strength. Really, I think you had tweeted that out, Phil, of like, his goal for the Dev squad, and then his goal for Vitesse, and then this and that, and all the way to the full men's team at Albania scoring this past international break.
Yeah, like I said, he keeps meeting every challenge head on, and it's really something to see because there's not been a journey like he's through the academy and into the senior game in this manner in quite some time. And he's got his first couple of goals for Southampton in a League Cup win at Newport. He's played Premier League football for them now. He's going on loans to clubs where you wouldn't immediately imagine that he would get as much football as he ends up getting, particularly at Vitesse to start with. He's forced his way into the Albanian national team. Now he's at Southampton. And it won't surprise me if by November, if he's playing regular starter minutes there, because every single thing that comes his way, he seems to just take in his stride and improve his game, work hard and impress from it. And it's just a delight to watch so far.
It will be another sneaky way to potentially improve your FPL team later this season for those who play. I'm not trying to help Brandon Busby beat me in our own fantasy league, but, maybe he'll take that advice. Last one that we wanted to touch on here, Phil, is probably the one maybe that has at least people on social media the most excited is young Levi Colwill, who at 18 years of age seems to be taking the championship by storm at Huddersfield, and particularly with the upcoming Chelsea center back crisis potentially next season, could be playing his way into a position where he would be worth a look for the maybe within a shout of the first team if the trajectory remains the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've spoken before about all of the centre half options at Chelsea. None of them are naturally left-sided. And although Antonio Rudiger isn't naturally left-sided, he's proven that he can play there to a high standard. And if you're looking to a succession plan for him, knowing that he's out of contract next summer and yet to sign a new one with less than encouraging signs about doing so, then you might look at Levi because he's a naturally left-footed, left-sided defender who's got the size and the athleticism and the mentality that you look for in a modern defender. He likes to defend. He's very, very good in the air, but he's also the modern defender who can take the ball and build play from the back. He's very confident in stepping out and breaking the lines with his passing. He doesn't shirk the defensive issue. I think it was revealing when he played in the EFL Trophy last season, particularly against Bristol Rovers, who gave him plenty of long balls to see if he was up for the challenge, and he ticked all those boxes, flying colours, and encouraged the likes of Huddersfield to go and get him on loan. He's already established himself maybe as one of their most important players. He's got an England under-21 call-up for the first time, despite it being an age group a couple above his actual age. And Yeah, we've seen similar things before. We've seen Tomori at Derby be outstanding. We've seen Marc Guehi at Swansea be outstanding. All of them prefer playing on the left of the defence at Chelsea, and all of them anointed by a significant portion of the fan base as Chelsea's left-sided defender of the future. Now, we know what happened with Tomori. We know what's happened with Guehi. Everyone seems to be really, really high on Levi. So if there's a pathway, great. If there isn't a pathway, are people going to say, well, don't worry, we've got this guy coming up after him? It's a cycle that none of us want to keep experiencing, because we'd like to see these players come into the first team and prove that they can be the succession plan. Levi has an opportunity to do that. We were talking about him after a month of senior football here. Brilliant start. Let's hope he keeps that up for the season. Asks questions of the hierarchy at Chelsea, and hopefully he has a future in the first team.
I mean, off to a flying start, I'd say so. He's played 100% of the minutes, right? He's played 5 matches in the championship, 450 minutes, scored
a goal,
90, and he scored a game-winning goal in stoppage time. Said it was the best moment of his career so far. I do want to point out one thing, Phil. This might be considered a key to success, especially from a player's view. In Naz's piece on goal.com, he had a nice interview in the Next Gen series with Levi, and in talking with him about getting his move and how quickly he settled at Huddersfield. This is what Levi said, quote, "Along with completing the loan move early in the window, it helped me to settle down and be comfortable quicker, which is shown on the pitch with me and my teammates trusting each other so much," end quote. And he goes on to talk more about it. But again, Phil, he's like, it's a different level than academy football. I had to quicken up real fast. It's a different style of play. The coach is, formerly connected to Marcelo Bielsa. Therefore, it's a highly technical, hardworking system. And he wouldn't be in the position of playing all 450 minutes and having earned the manager's trust if he had not gotten this done so quickly in the summer.
Yeah, and it's a comparison to what we were talking about with Ethan Ampadu going on loan to Venezia at the very last minute. He now has to go to a new country, into a squad that has spent pre-season together, worked together to create a bond, to try to gel in a new division. They've already had 10% of their fixtures, give or take, and it's he's going there during an international break where he's with Wales, so he doesn't even get time to settle with the squad at that point either. This is why you ideally want your move sorted as early in the window as possible, because it allows you to go in on a level with the players you're going to be competing with at that new club, and to assert yourself throughout pre-season, throughout friendlies, and to prove to the manager that you're ready. Because once the football starts for real, the time for risk taking is not quite there. And exactly what Levi said, he went there earlier. He would have made a decision to get that move in and done early, and he's reaping the rewards from it so far.
All right, Dan, that's a comprehensive wrap, sir. That is the academy top to bottom.
Well, again, we like going through the Cobham crew. We like talking about who's having success and finding success, whether that's in the club currently or out on loan, or even who have made their career outside of Chelsea, that we're very happy for, because, again, they came up through the ranks. So, again, Phil, we appreciate you making the time to come in and join us and knowledge us up so that we can be better informed and the listeners can be better informed.
Happy to be here anytime, and I'll leave you with the fact that Chelsea have got another academy graduate for the international ranks, 34-year-old Anthony Grant, who some of you may remember making his debut away to Manchester United 15 or something years ago in the game where Thiago scored that goal. He made his debut for Jamaica at 34 years young over this international break, and goes back to what you said. Chelsea produce footballers who enjoy careers at the highest levels.
That is true. Well, again, thank you, Phil, for taking us through that. And for all of you that are becoming youth aficionados, remember, we have 3 matches across the Dev Squad and the U18's, as well as some U19 UEFA Youth League matches as well in September. So plenty of football for you to catch up. Highlights are posted online. Chelsea on their own website do match recaps. Sometimes there are highlights. I believe there's highlights of the West Ham match on there. But anyways, go check it out. There's plenty of content for you to get involved and get educated. Again, this season we are covering the club top to bottom. There's going to be no part of the club uncovered by us this season. So in case you've missed it, we do have a new women's pod coming out this season. Nick and gang are dropping that. Dan and I, Nick, continue doing the men's squad, and obviously Phil rounding us out with the youth academy. So hope you enjoy it. It's going to be a great season. International break's almost over by the time you're listening to this, so keep your head up. It's going to be great. So that's going to wrap us up. Until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.